The security that is to his right and allegedly explicitly said that they are going to come after me tomorrow. Call me names, I do not care. Call me what you want. Go down that rabbit hole, whatever.
But when you go after my family, my Turning Point USA family, my Charlie Kirk show family, when you go after the people that I love, but he was not messaging people the day before saying, I am going to be there, coming after me, someone is going to kill me. He did not say that.
And there are moments in a story where a new development lands, and everything that came before, it suddenly looks completely different. What is reportedly happening right now inside the Kirk family is exactly that kind of moment. And the person at the center of it is not a political rival, not a journalist, not an online investigator. It is Charlie Kirk's own mother. When a grieving mother starts quietly pulling interview clips side by side and realizing the versions do not match, that is not gossip. That is not political warfare. That is a mother who loved her son and is no longer convinced that the person controlling his legacy is telling the truth about what happened to him. And according to people close to the Kirk family, that is exactly where Catherine Kirk has reportedly arrived. Really interesting that on Charlie Kirk's list of priorities, he did not even name his wife. Wrote on everything he has papers everywhere. This says it is the priorities. It says family, children, legacy kids, number one. Let us start with the specific contradiction that reportedly caught Charlie's mother's attention first, because once you see it laid out clearly, it is very hard to explain away. In one of Erika's early post-assassination interviews, including an account described in connection with her New York Times conversation, she described the night before Charlie's final trip to Utah Valley University in very specific and charged terms. She said the atmosphere was tense and heavy. She said they had dinner with a faith leader. She said she urged Charlie to wear a bulletproof vest before he left for the event. She said that a friend had suggested Charlie speak behind bulletproof glass. Read that back slowly. Bulletproof vest, bulletproof glass, a faith leader at dinner, a tense, heavy atmosphere. That is not a description of a routine evening before a routine speaking event. That is a description of people who believed there was a credible, specific, and immediate threat to Charlie Kirk's physical safety. It implies foreknowledge of danger at a level that demands serious investigation into what was known by whom and why nothing prevented what happened the next morning. Who are Charlie's parents? I think that is a question that we have all asked. Matter of fact, let me just take it a step further. Where are his cousins? Then, weeks later, Erika sat down with Megyn Kelly for a live interview, and in that interview, she described that same night, the same final evening, before Charlie was unalived, as normal and calm. Just a regular night. Nothing unusual, nothing heavy, nothing that suggested anyone around Charlie was afraid of anything. Those two descriptions of the same night cannot both be true. They are not variations on a theme or different emotional interpretations of the same events. One says there was immediate fear, specific precautions, and a tense atmosphere charged with a sense of danger. The other says everything was fine. That is a direct documented contradiction between two major media interviews given by the same woman about the same night. And according to insiders close to the family, Charlie's mother noticed. She reportedly began pulling those interviews and placing them side by side, watching them back to back, listening carefully to the specific details each version included and excluded. And the more she compared them, the more she reached a conclusion that she has apparently been sitting with in private for months about the day before the shooting. He was at the office, and we were going to meet for dinner beforehand with a dear friend of ours who I wanted to just be with us and pray with us. Around the same period that Charlie's mother was reportedly doing her own private analysis, Candace Owens publicly raised a detail that people tracking this story have flagged as highly significant. According to sources Owens described as having spoken with directly, there was a Zoom call on September 9, 2025, the night before Charlie was attacked at Utah Valley University, involving Charlie Kirk, Josh Hammer, and a rabbi based in Israel. The stated purpose of that call, according to those sources, was not casual prayer or spiritual encouragement. It was about political positioning, specifically about where Charlie Kirk was going to land on issues with significant international implications. Think about that in context. Charlie's own confirmed text messages, authenticated by Andrew Kvet, show him writing in the weeks before his passing that he was leaving the pro-Israel cause after losing a $2 million donor over his refusal to cancel Tucker Carlson. The event that happened with Charlie, the assassination with Charlie.
And so I know that you and I even talked about how I used to say, Charlie, have you ever thought about wearing a vest? He would nod to that and be like, I have looked into it, but he would always say, if they are going to get me, they are going to get me. He was not afraid.
He was actively documented in a state of pushing back against donor pressure on Israel-related political positioning. A conversation about that same political positioning involving a rabbi in Israel happening the night before he was assassinated is not an unremarkable detail. Whether that Zoom call is connected to anything that followed, whether it is relevant to Charlie's attacker, whether it represents innocent political dialogue, or something more consequential. None of that has been answered by any official source. The call's existence, as described by Owens, has not been independently verified by a major news organization. But the documented context around Charlie's state of mind, in those final weeks, the donor pressure texts, the refusal to comply, the visible frustration, makes a conversation about political positioning the night before his passing something the community following this case cannot set aside. Never. He was never afraid of that. Neither was I.
Obviously, we protect our children. We do not show their faces on the internet. So that is very intentional. But I think we lived our life in such a way where if that was our last day, it was our last day. Like, we always lived as if it was the last day. That is why Charlie's speeches were so good.
Then there is the meeting origin story, because this is where Charlie's mother's private comparison notes reportedly stretched beyond the final night contradiction into a broader pattern. Erika has told the story of how she and Charlie first crossed paths multiple times in multiple interviews, and the versions do not agree. In one telling, a spontaneous, almost romantic encounter at an airport during a spiritual pilgrimage with her mother, a divinely guided chance meeting where Charlie appeared in the ticket line and her mother encouraged her to introduce herself. In a second telling, the same airport, but she was there professionally, not on a pilgrimage, and the spiritual framing was absent. She screams in the middle of a parking lot. She screams in the middle of a doctor's office. Everybody kind of knows where they were when Charlie got an alibi and pretending like they did not understand the instructions of this alibi for Fort Wuka. Do not buy Charlie suddenly need advice from a pastor, a priest, and a rabbi. It sounds ridiculous. On September 8th that he texted and said, "I am abandoning the pro-Israel cause." Well, Josh Hammer came out and clarified that actually Charlie sent that text message on September 9th, the day before he died. In a third telling, a direct message on social media. No airport, no pilgrimage, no chance encounter at all. Just an online message that started things. 3 versions of the same foundational story, 3 different framings of how the central relationship in her public identity began. In isolation, people's memories of how they met their spouses can shift across retellings. That is a real and documented aspect of human memory. But in the context of the final night contradiction, and in the context of the broader documented pattern of Erika misrepresenting her personal history, 3 incompatible versions of the meeting story land differently. Many people know that Charlie sensed he was going to die tomorrow is an absolute fact. Why these individuals are all being quiet about that is a massive question mark. Okay, there is also the Cabot Phillips dimension, which deserves specific attention because it is documented, verifiable, and directly relevant to the question of whether Erika's origin story with Charlie could have been as spontaneous and disconnected from her prior world as she has presented. Cabot Phillips is the senior editor at the Daily Wire and a figure with documented professional ties to Turning Point USA through his work as editor-in-chief at Campus Reform. The Wayback Machine contains an archived Instagram post from September 2017 showing Erika and Phillips tagging each other with the caption, "Yes, we are that couple that gets painting lessons together." She does not want to dress. I looked everywhere. I would like to know more about Charlie's last day. I can obviously put together what Frank said. I can put together what his schedule was, but that is not a question that she is comfortable answering. And by the way, that dear friend she is referencing, of course, we now know is a priest. A priest that came over to pray over Charlie and Erika's marriage the night before, is what I am told. That is 1 year before any version of Erika's Charlie Kirk meeting story begins. And here is the specific point that is documented and has never been addressed. Cabot Phillips knew Charlie Kirk personally. There are photographs of the two men together. They were in overlapping social and professional circles in the conservative media space. That means Erika, through her documented relationship with Phillips in September 2017, was not operating in total isolation from Charlie Kirk's world. She was one relationship away from it. The idea that she existed in a completely separate sphere from Charlie's. Life we know happens thereafter, is Charlie concludes this call with Josh and the rabbi, and then he sends off text messages to his security chief, Dan Flood, also to Andrew Cavett, and he says to them that they are going to who is they. Well, Erika wants us to believe that he was referring to the left until a divinely guided airport encounter across whichever version of that story you are hearing does not hold up against the documented social reality of her actual connections. Phillips was embedded in the same conservative media ecosystem as Charlie. Erika was in a documented relationship with Phillips 1 year before she claims to have met Charlie for the first time. Charlie's mother, according to sources close to the family, has not been fed this information by Candace Owens or by online investigators. She has been pulling it herself, watching interviews back to back, comparing specific details, noticing where the versions diverge and reaching conclusions based on what she personally observed and experienced as Charlie's mother across the years of his marriage, messaging people that day. Before saying, "I am going to be, they are coming after me, someone is going to kill me." He did not say that, and I have the dynamic that sources describe is one of two mothers on opposite sides of this story. Erika's mother, Lori France, has reportedly been a central strategic presence in how Erika has managed her public narrative from the very first days after Charlie was unalived, shaping messaging, managing appearances, framing challenges to the narrative as external manipulation by Owens and others standing there at the ticket line, and there was a guy who was checking out, and the "or" with the guy "get." You know what I am talking about. Get your ticket, check your bag. And I see him and I was like, I told my mom, I was like, that guy looks really familiar. And my mom's like, go say hi. On the other side, Charlie's mother is not operating from a politically motivated script. She is a mother who lost her son, who watched his memorial unfold without being given a platform to speak at the ceremony honoring him, and who has been sitting with contradictions she identified on her own. Those two versions of the story, two contradictory Final Nights 3, incompatible meeting origin stories, a documented prior relationship with someone in Charlie's professional world. Got finished with his burger, and he just sat there and he looked at me and he is like, "You know what, I am not going to hire you." I was like, that is fine. I do not need this job. I am doing plenty of other things here in Manhattan. Who is like, "I am going to date you," are what Charlie's mother has reportedly been sitting with. And according to sources, she is no longer sitting quietly. What she does with what she knows could be the most consequential development in this entire story, not because of political agendas or platform building, because she is the person who raised Charlie Kirk, who knew him his entire life. I met Charlie. The only reason I sat down with him, because I thought it was a consulting position for work. I did not date in Manhattan. I saw the pits of hell of the dating pool through my roommates who watched. His marriage from inside the family who attended the July 6th preliminary. Hearing alongside Erika in a joint family statement, and who is according to those same sources still asking the questions that joint statement did not answer.
Get a random DM on Instagram and you never know, like, if these people are the real people or whatever. Anyway, so it was Charlie. He was in my DMs and he was like, hey, I am in New York. I want to sit down and talk to you about the faith stuff. I have a Fox hit, total like name drop. I have a Fox hit to do in the city. And then I need to meet with you afterwards. So it is going to be really lit.
The contradictions Erika built her narrative on were never going to hold forever. Stories built on inconsistencies eventually collapse under examination. And when the person doing the examining is the one who knew Charlie best of all, the examination matters more than any Parcast episode or online investigation ever could. Makes sense to me as I was doing this timeline, because I remember when Charlie met Erika. I remember Tyler setting this up. I remember the conversations, and I still have the conversations, thankfully, 'cause I delete nothing. What do you think? Does the contradiction between the Bulletproof Vest account and the Normal Calm Night account deserve a direct public explanation from Erika? And does the Cabot Phillips timeline change how you see the origin? There are moments when the weight of unanswered questions becomes heavier than any official statement can carry, and that is precisely where the Kirk family story sits right now. Catherine Kirk, according to those who have spoken with her in private, has moved past the stage of quiet comparison and into something far more determined. She is not issuing press releases. She is not appearing on cable news. She is simply refusing to accept that the version of events presented to the public is the full and accurate accounting of her son's final hours and the years that led to them. The night before the Utah Valley University event is only the starting point. Once a mother begins to notice one set of incompatible details, she starts noticing others, and the pattern that emerges is difficult to dismiss as ordinary human inconsistency. Erika's early description of a tense, heavy evening, complete with discussions of protective gear and a faith leader present, stands in such stark opposition to the later calm, ordinary night narrative that it forces a basic question. Which account is true, and why did the story change? If the first version was accurate, then the people closest to Charlie knew, or at least strongly suspected, that danger was immediate. If the second version is accurate, then the first version was an invention or a dramatic embellishment offered at a moment when public attention was at its peak. Either possibility raises further questions that have never been publicly resolved. Charlie's mother has reportedly watched both interviews multiple times, noting the specific language used, the pauses, the emotional emphasis, and the details that appear in one and vanish in the other. She has done this not as a political actor, but as a parent who buried her son and who now finds the official narrative surrounding his death increasingly difficult to reconcile with the man she raised. The Zoom call detail raised by Candace Owens lands in this same unsettled space. A conversation involving Charlie Josh Hammer and a rabbi in Israel on the evening of September 9th, focused, according to the sources Owens cited, on political positioning rather than simple prayer. That same night, Charlie is said to have sent messages reflecting his frustration with donor pressure after he refused to cancel Tucker Carlson, and after he indicated he was stepping away from the pro-Israel cause. The combination of those elements creates a sequence that people following the case continue to examine. No official investigation has confirmed or denied the existence of the call. No major news organization has independently verified the sources, yet the surrounding documented context of Charlie's text messages and his public posture in the weeks before his death makes the reported conversation impossible to ignore for those who believe the full story has not been told. Erika Kirk, according to the same circle of family-adjacent sources, has been aware of these claims and has treated them as part of the larger set of inconsistencies she is evaluating on her own. She is not relying on online investigators or podcast hosts. She is relying on her own memory of her son, the interviews she has studied, and the gaps that appear when those interviews are placed side by side. The origin story of Charlie and Erika's relationship forms another layer of the same pattern. 3 distinct versions have been offered across different interviews. The airport pilgrimage meeting, guided by her mother. The professional airport encounter without the spiritual framing. The Instagram direct message with no airport at all. Memory can shift. People retell their own love stories with different emphasis over time. But when those shifts occur against a backdrop of other contradictions, and when one of the parties is the widow controlling the public legacy of a high-profile figure who was assassinated, the variations take on a different weight. Cabot Phillips enters the picture as a documented fact rather than a rumor. An archived Instagram post from September 2017 shows Erika and Phillips presenting themselves as a couple taking painting lessons together. Phillips was already operating inside the conservative media world that included Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. Photographs exist of Phillips and Charlie together. Their professional circles overlapped. That places Erika 1 degree of separation from Charlie's world a full year before any of the meeting stories she has told. The spontaneous chance encounter narrative, whether framed as divine guidance or professional coincidence, becomes harder to sustain when the social map is examined. Charlie's mother has reportedly taken note of this timeline as well. She has not needed outside researchers to hand her the information. She has lived inside the family long enough to know the relationships that existed and the ones that were presented later. The 2 mothers now occupy opposite positions in the story. Lori France has reportedly remained a steady strategic presence beside her daughter, helping shape the public messaging that followed the assassination and framing outside questions as attacks. Erika Kirk has remained largely silent in public, while according to sources continuing her private examination. She attended the memorial. She participated in the joint family statement around the July preliminary hearing. Yet those same sources say she is still asking the questions the joint statement left unanswered. She is still comparing the versions. She is still noticing the places where the accounts do not align. The consequence of a mother reaching her own conclusions after months of private study is different from the consequence of a podcast host or an online researcher doing the same work. Erika Kirk raised Charlie. She knew him before Turning Point USA, before the national stage, before the marriage, and before the final night. Her perspective carries a different kind of authority, precisely because it is not filtered through political strategy or media opportunity. If she decides to speak, the weight of that decision will rest on the simple fact that she is Charlie's mother, and that she has been examining the contradictions for herself. The bulletproof vest account and the calm night account cannot both be true. The 3 meeting stories cannot all be accurate. The prior relationship with Cabot Phillips sits on the public record. The reported Zoom call remains unverified by major outlets, yet is surrounded by documented context that makes it relevant to anyone still examining the sequence of events. These are not peripheral details. They are the specific points that, according to people close to the family, have kept Erika Kirk from accepting the narrative as complete. What she ultimately chooses to do with the conclusions she has reached remains private for now. The sources who have described her process say only that she is no longer sitting quietly with the contradictions. In a story already filled with public statements, interviews, and competing accounts, the quiet determination of a mother who lost her son may prove more disruptive than any external investigation. The contradictions were never going to remain hidden forever. When the person examining them is the one who knew Charlie longest and loved him first, the examination itself becomes part of the historical record, whether or not it ever appears in a formal interview or a court filing. The community that continues to follow every development is watching not only the legal process against the accused shooter, but also the quieter process unfolding inside the family. That quieter process is driven by a mother who has compared the interviews side by side and who has decided that the versions do not match.